Free thinkers, we're free. Here's what we do. We can take some classes, affect the masses. There's no excuse. You've been loosed.
This is From Destruction to Dignity with Janice Pons. Each week, Janice shares her wisdom to enlighten, educate, and advance the culture in America today. Janice Pons is a mother, author, and free thinker, and your host for our podcast this evening. Now let's join your host, Janice Pons.
Greetings, greetings, greetings. Come on in. Come on in. Welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Janice Pons. I am the host on this show, on this podcast, From Destruction to Dignity. From Destruction to Dignity. Clinical perspectives, spiritual truths. Now, as the host of this show, you know me. I'm going to go in, and this month of September, we are talking about issues that are affecting our great nation that have a specific relation to addiction. Far too many of our citizens that we love and we care about are dying prematurely. They're dying prematurely as their lives are being ravaged by addiction. And every life that ends related to addiction, it's preventable. That has a lot of implications for our health care. Listen, we want to form a more perfect union, which means we're flowing together as one. So if we want to flow together as one, and we've got some that are over here that are not in the flow, they're ravaged, they're hurting, they're dying, they're suffering. Yeah, showing up in emergency rooms. Just absolutely, lives are devastated. Families are devastated. It's all subject to change. I've seen it over and over again. It's subject to change. And this is a great passion of mine in that I'm very concerned because I've seen what can happen when we band together as one and we provide support networks and various modalities to be able to address these issues that are going on with our precious fellow Americans. Because remember, we are one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So in our great nation with our great flag and our great seal where the person that occupies the White House and the people that are on Capitol Hill, we need them to be keyed in to the issues related to our citizens as it relates to them getting free from addiction. And yes, the person that is dealing with addiction has a responsibility, and we have a responsibility as it relates to health care. We have a responsibility to fund it. We have a responsibility. Do we have a responsibility to fund Medicare? Do we have a responsibility for people in our great nation to have health care? Do we? Do they deserve health care? Should we be funding our military? Should people be receiving the payment that they have paid into Social Security? See, all of those things are things that flow together that form a more perfect union. Should we be paying off the debt? That helps us to form a more perfect union. And all those things that I just talked about, our taxes go towards those things. And so all those things are related because the Medicare, Medicare, and all the care, it has to do with us being a powerful nation. That's part of our responsibility. Oh, yeah. So we're going to dive into some of the specifics of those things as we go forward. But tonight, we're going to look at something that is of great concern to me. There's a deadly toll that is going on in our nation, and it has to do with the deadly toll of OxyContin marketing. You know, we are tackling addiction this month. I lost a brother, my baby brother, who I lost in 1984. He died from overdose to heroin. A lot of people who are dealing with OxyContin addiction, and we're going to talk about what happened in the marketing with that, they end up being on heroin. I lost a precious brother. It was preventable. We didn't know what to do, but we know better now. We know better now. We're one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And if we have liberty and justice for all, okay, that's going to look like something. That's going to sound like something. That's going to be us rallying together to form a more perfect union where we're flowing together as one. Why? Because we're cognizant. We're being intentional. We're being targeted because we're going, wait a minute. We don't want to lose anybody else because we've lost enough people. Speaking of which, let's dive into some specifics tonight. Listen, probably everybody that's listening, you know someone that's affected by opioid dependence. In our great nation, in 2022, it has been recorded that nearly 110,000 people overdosed and died. That's a lot of Americans. That's a lot of our fellow Americans. 110,000 overdose deaths in 2022. All this data has been kept by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. What are we trying to prevent? What are we trying to prevent? Listen, the preliminary, there was an analysis of the CDC. They looked at all these numbers, right? The preliminary count of 109,680 overdose deaths was only slightly higher than the figure for 2021. When 109,179 people were estimated to have died, according to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Now, overdose deaths have climbed significantly during that year. They had climbed significantly during that year and the prior year, increasing by roughly, listen to this, 17% in 2021. And it had increased 30% in 2020. So last year, 110,000 Americans died from overdose. That's a lot of people. Dr. Rahul Gupta, the director of the White House Office of National Drug Control Policy, he said in a statement recently that the current administration's overdose strategies were working. Okay. When I hear someone say that, I want to go, as evidenced by what? How do we know it's working? He said, we've expanded the treatment to millions of Americans and we're improving access to naloxone to reverse overdoses, and we're attacking the illicit fentanyl supply chain at every choke point. Now, some people would say, I beg to differ. There's a lot going on at our borders. I did hear today that in the state of Oklahoma, we have 50 National Guards at the border. I'm grateful. And when they're done with their 1 month duty, Iowa, the governor of Iowa is going to send 50 down. Okay. Now, I will say this, under the previous administration, the issue of the border issue, it was under control because President Trump told the president of Mexico, I think he said, you got 2 weeks to get this thing under control or we are putting terrorists on you. And in 2 weeks, there were 26,000 troops on that side of the border that was controlling what was going on. True story. Look it up. So when I hear somebody say, he didn't do nothing, that is what Barack Hussein Obama said. He said he didn't do nothing. He did nothing for the country. It's a bona fide lie. Let's move on, because I'll get real political right there, right? I just did a little bit, but it's the truth. We need to know what's really going on. What's happened related to the drug addiction? The rate of fentanyl coming across the border had decreased significantly. They had the troops on the other side, and those troops were helping people in Guatemala and different specific countries helping them with their farming. Oh, everything got really solution focused when you say, we're going to put tariffs on you. See, this SEAL, they work for us. Who's making that border safe and how? As evidenced by what? Who's making this nation safe? See, I really don't care about the political parties. I want to know policies matter. And all of this falls under policies. Yeah, it does. So fentanyl has taken out a lot of people. And that number of 110,000 deaths in 2022, a lot of it was attributed to illicit fentanyl supply. Newly released data offered the latest indication of the catastrophic effects of fentanyl, which is a synthetic opiate that is often mixed with stimulants and other drugs that can go undetected before a drug sample is digested. Listen, bottom line, folk don't know what's in this stuff. Nobody knows. Even with the marijuana, it's laced with fentanyl. Someone here in Tulsa a few months ago lost their loved one, absolutely ravaged, absolutely grief-stricken, smoking marijuana that was laced with fentanyl, and they overdosed. These staggering numbers, 110,000 Americans dying last year in 2022, is staggering to me. That is just like a showstopper for me. Drug overdoses have contributed to a decrease in life expectancy. We already talked about alcohol, which is a drug. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago, that it is decreased the life expectancy of women in our nation by up to 28 years. That's a lot of years. Okay, in the United States, this has become a leading cause of death in our great country. We want us to flow together as one. That's what a perfect union is, a more perfect union. Flowing together as one. If we have citizens that are being ravaged like this, and we lost 110,000 in 2022, might we need to look at something with great specificity? Might we need to do that? Now, listen to me. There are other drugs in our nation's supply that can be mixed with fentanyl, but there are some cheaper things that have emerged that are addictive too. And one of them, when I heard this, I was like, Lord, have mercy. We need to be talking about what I'm getting ready to go into right now, because it's going to be, it's out on the streets right now. And you may not have heard of it. Xylazine. 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 Xylazine is an animal tranquilizer. It's for horses. But guess what they're using it for? You want to guess? It's a dangerous veterinary tranquilizer. However, it has become a part of the overdose crisis. Yeah. This new drug begins rapidly spreading through the streets. Xylazine, this animal tranquilizer. See, they were cutting everything. They was lacing methamphetamine, cocaine, heroin, marijuana with fentanyl. Guess what's cheaper? Xylazine. Increasingly, it's used as a synthetic cutting agent for opioids like heroin. Xylazine it's been found that it's popping up in cities all over the nation, guys. It's popping up everywhere. The use of the drug is increasing at an exponential rate where it lands, and it's causing outbreaks of skin infections and overdoses. The national spread of xylazine is a public health threat. It is a public health threat. Mark it down. You heard it on this show tonight, on this podcast tonight. If we don't pay attention to this thing, it's already out there wreaking havoc, and people don't even. What are you talking about? The tranquilizer that they give the horses that people are using that to get high. They don't even know it's in the drug. They don't even know it's in the heroin. They don't know it's in the methamphetamine and the cocaine and the marijuana. It's cheap. Xylazine is almost never seen by itself. Instead, it's typically added to drug formulations containing fentanyl. So they're mixing fentanyl and xylazine together. So, of course, that stretches it. You get more bang for your buck. Yeah. Where is it made? Underground labs. Wow. Over the past 10 years, synthetically produced fentanyl has largely taken over the illicit opioid market that was previously dominated by agriculturally produced heroin. Fentanyl can be several hundred times more powerful and potent than heroin. These people are getting it in them, and they're just like, they're gone. Heads back, they're out. The part of the brain that controls breathing stops. God help us. Thank you for doing it. 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 This is a serious issue. Fentanyl is very short acting, and keeping cravings at bay can require injecting up to 5 or 6 times per day. I know of attorneys. You get so far out in this addiction, you don't care. You become disconnected. Doctors, I know doctors and lawyers, they're risking losing everything. All they're thinking about is getting that needle in their arms. Guys, they need us. They need us keyed in. So we have professionals, we have homeless people, we have all walks of lives, mothers with children, injecting up to 5 or 6 times a day, rather than perhaps just 2 or 3 if they were using heroin. Why? The fentanyl is short acting. Now that means repeatedly finding a safe place to go shoot up, acquiring a clean syringe, and not being concerned about overdosing. So it means less time between injections to take care of basic needs. So it increases the risk of injection-related health concerns such as infections and vein collapse. You see how the healthcare picture extrapolates, and it just gets wider and wider and wider. And these people are going to show up at ERs. They're in our homes. They're on our jobs. and they will eventually crash. Now, because of what we've just laid out, this is where xylazine comes in. Why? Because it extends the effects of fentanyl, or as this is often put on the street, it gives it legs. Why? It extends it. Adding a xylazine to a hit can postpone cravings. I mean, when these people get in that spot, they want relief. They got to shoot up now. I know what that looks like. I deal with these precious people. They want out. They want out. So adding xylazine to a hit, it can postpone cravings and withdrawal symptoms for twice as long as fentanyl alone. See, guys, listen. We're not talking about people being, low life thing. Why don't you just say no? No. Outside of a miracle, they can't say no. Why? They're dealing with a physiological dependence to a mind-altering substance. If they stop cold turkey, some of them will die. You can go into withdrawal and have a seizure and die. They need a medically supervised detox. That reminds me of, I think I've talked about that before. Somebody was on Facebook one time, some religious group, and they were talking about, join us in prayer. We're going to cast this alcohol demon. I'm kind of digressing, but it ties in. We're going to cast this alcohol demon out of somebody. I was like, oh, my God. And then they went on to say that the blood pressure was 200 over 150. Uh-huh. And I was like, oh, my God, they need to get him to the hospital. He needs a medically supervised detox. These silly people talking about laying hands on somebody and casting out a demon. Are you kidding me? I stepped in. I said, let me tell y'all something right now. You all need to get shared liability. You get shared liability with that man and stop playing. Get him out of that pastor's office and get him to the emergency room. I let it go, prayed, told him what I had to say. I went up one side of him and right down the other, okay? The next day I went and checked it, and they got the man to the emergency room. Praise God! We got him to the hospital, and all of the staff there were Christians. Yeah, Christians are everywhere in all professions. Listen, we need people with common sense. Everybody that's good at what they do, they might not be a Christian. Yeah, they might be of another religious persuasion, but we need trained people. What's my point here? My point is we need people that know what they're doing and know we need toxicologists. We need addictionologists. We need licensed clinicians. We need this multimodal approach to this issue where they're getting the xylazine and they're getting the fentanyl, and this is what they're using to cut stuff with, cut the other drugs. Xylazine is a risk. It's a tranquilizer for horses, but people are getting a hold of it and they become fully unconscious. They black out. They black out. It's harmful. The sedating effects of xylazine also increase overdose risks. Guess what's even worse? This naloxone that first responders are using when they're dealing with an opiate addict, it does not reverse what's going on with these precious people. And sometimes they don't know what they're dealing with. Xylazine's involved. Why? Because it's not an opioid. It's a tranquilizer. It's for horses, big animals. But it's being used to cut drugs. They're mixing it with fentanyl. So you get the picture here? You get the picture of what's going on, that this stimulant is being mixed with fentanyl. So all of this is contributing to last year we had 110,000 of our fellow Americans that lost their lives, guys, and it was all preventable. When enough consumers know that xylazine is present, and in what concentration, they can create a market demand for safer xylazine-free formulation. Listen, we've got to get these folk involved. We've got to get Congress involved, senators and representatives. Xylazine. Talk to your senators. Pick up the phone. Ask them, do you know about Xylazine? When you go to these meetings, ask your representatives, do they know about Xylazine? I bet a lot of them will go, no, what is that? Be in a position where we can educate them. Send them this podcast. Yeah. We want harm reduction programs. They do exist. There's a lot of things that we need to be looking at. Now, this deadly toll of OxyContin marketing. All of that, I'm framing it around marketing. Let me tell you what happened. There's been an uptick in rates of infections, namely hepatitis, infective endocarditis. It occurred in 2010 when OxyContin maker Purdue Pharma reformulated OxyContin to be harder to crush and snort. That was a dynamic. So what did that lead to? People couldn't get it and crush it and smoke it. They couldn't, it wouldn't crush. You know what they did? Started shooting up heroin. You know what that did? It triggered the spread of infectious disease, hepatitis, HIV, sharing needles, because they got to have that fix. So here we are 25 years later of when OxyContin showed up on the scene, and the mortality and the morbidity consequences of it is still salient. It is still off the chain. So from 2010 to 2020, there was an uprising in hepatitis B, hepatitis C, infective endocarditis. I always leave out a syllable. I have to really work at saying that word. Endocarditis. Why? More people were shooting up. Now, what they did a study. There was a study that was done, and I want to capture this in the last few minutes because it's very significant. And the bottom line is what they learned. Dr. Julia Dennett and Dr. Greg Gonzalez with Yale University, Public Health of New Haven, Connecticut, what they found was that the states where there was an increase in marketing of OxyContin was where there was an uprise. There was an uptick of people dying. 110,000 people died last year. So before 2010, the rates of infections and associated with injection drug use and overdose deaths, it was low. There was no difference. But after 2010, after they made it such that you couldn't crush it or snort it, heroin, people shooting up. Yeah, they got to have it. Remember, it's a physiologic addiction to a mind-altering substance. So the injection drug use in those states that were exposed to more marketing shot up. So why were they marketing this stuff if it's killing people? Greed. Listen, this thing is going to, and we're going to wrap this up, because look at here. It's going to boil down to point of use. You have to decide, everybody, we got to decide if we want to live or die. And folk would do stuff and they'll pray for me. Well, yeah, we're going to pray, baby, but you got something you got to do as well. Eating well. Getting plenty of sleep. Some people need to go through a structured setting of treatment, a medically supervised detox, a medically managed regimen that's overseen by a psychiatrist and or a medical doctor. A psychiatrist is a doctor. But where I work, we got psychiatrists, medical doctor, we got neuropsychologists, occupational therapists, speech and language therapists, addiction therapists, social worker, nurse, certified nurse assistants, a multimodal approach. These people, our citizens, are in trouble. So treatment, eating well, that's personal responsibility. Getting plenty of sleep, engaging in approved physical activity, getting with your doctor. This is what I need to do. I'm going to willfully pursue. I'm going to be intentional in pursuing recovery and wellness. A lot of people are having pain issues. What do we need to do about pain? Get with your doctor, but also deep breathing, getting extra oxygen to your brain has been known to be effective for people dealing with stress, dealing with pain, reducing stress in your life, cutting back on alcohol, joining a support group, not smoking, tracking your pain level so you can talk to your doctor and you work together as a team to help you get well. This is rampant. But we want to take our citizens from destruction to dignity because God has a great plan in this great nation for freedom from addiction. Good night.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of From Destruction to Dignity with Janice Pons. Janice's mission is to provoke thought, bring awareness, and point people towards intervention when needed. As a reminder, this show is not therapy, but for educational purposes only. For more information, check out JanicePons.com or follow her on social media.
Education, affirmation, dedication, information, revelation. A new nation. We are God empowered. Strength is ours. Liberty. Been set free. Education, affirmation.